What if I told you that one of the smallest states in America is hiding some of the darkest, most terrifying secrets in the entire country? Delaware. What they don't put on the welcome signs are the screams that echo through its old stone walls, the shadow figures that roam its historic mansions, the tortured souls that never found their way out. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on three of Delaware's most bone-chilling, skin-crawling, sleep-destroying haunted locations. These aren't just ghost stories passed around campfires. These are places where real people, skeptics, historians, and everyday visitors walked in curious and walked out forever changed. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at Delaware the same way again. Fort Delaware, the island of the damned. Sitting alone on Pea Patch Island in the middle of the Delaware River, Fort Delaware looks like something straight out of a nightmare. A massive, cold, gray stone fortress surrounded by water on all sides. There's no escaping it. Built in 1859, the fort was designed as a military stronghold. But history had other plans. When the Civil War broke out, it became one of the most overcrowded, disease-ridden, and brutal prison camps the war ever produced. Soldiers were packed in like animals. Food was scarce. The water was contaminated. And the Delaware summer heat turned those stone walls into an oven. Thousands of men died here. Not in battle, not with honor, but slowly, painfully forgotten on a tiny island in the middle of a river. Here's the thing about places where mass suffering happens. That kind of energy doesn't just disappear. It lingers. Fort Delaware has been investigated by paranormal researchers, featured on television shows like Ghost Asylum on Destination America, and visited by thousands of ghost hunters over the decades. What they found is hard to explain away. Rangers who work at the fort have reported hearing heavy footsteps in empty corridors late at night. Doors that were locked and bolted have been found wide open in the morning with no explanation. Visitors on ghost tours have reported being touched, grabbed, or shoved by something they couldn't see. And on multiple occasions, people have captured what appear to be full-bodied apparitions on camera in the fort's dark tunnels and cells. One of the most frequently reported phenomena is the overwhelming smell of gunpowder and rot in areas of the fort where no such materials exist, as if the suffering of the past is permanently soaked into the walls. One of the most chilling accounts came from a park ranger who had worked at Fort Delaware for years. She was closing up one evening, alone in the officers' quarters, when she heard a man's voice say her name clearly twice. She turned around. No one was there. She finished locking up and never worked a night shift alone again. A group of paranormal investigators set up audio recorders throughout the fort's lower level one night. When they played back the recordings, they captured what sounded like dozens of men moaning and whispering in a room that had been completely empty. On the same recording, a single voice, calm and clear, said, "Get out." Perhaps the most unsettling encounter involved a young boy who was visiting with his family during a daytime tour. He kept waving and smiling at a corner of the room. When his mother asked who he was waving at, he said, "The sad soldier." When she looked over, the corner was completely empty. The soldiers of Fort Delaware may have died here, but many of them, it seems, never left. Rockwood Mansion, the house that watches you. On the outskirts of Wilmington, Delaware, tucked behind trees and surrounded by sprawling grounds, sits Rockwood Mansion. Built in 1851 by Joseph Shipley, a wealthy merchant banker, the estate is a stunning example of rural Gothic revival architecture: tall spires, arched windows, stone walls thick enough to hold secrets for centuries. It's beautiful and deeply, profoundly unsettling. The mansion passed through generations of the same family for over 100 years. Generation after generation of Shipley descendants lived, worked, and died within those walls. And when the last family member finally gave up the estate in the 1970s, many historians and paranormal investigators believe the previous residents never quite made it out. Rockwood isn't the kind of haunted that announces itself with flying furniture or slamming doors. It's quieter than that, more personal. Staff members at the mansion, which now operates as a museum, have reported seeing a woman in Victorian dress standing near the upstairs windows, looking out at the gardens below. When approached, she vanishes. Others have heard the distinct sound of a music box playing in rooms where there is no music box. Objects in a mansion have a habit of moving on their own. Items carefully placed by museum curators will be found across the room the next morning, as if someone rearranged them overnight. One docent reported finding a rocking chair slowly moving back and forth in an empty room, on a day with no wind, no air conditioning, and no logical explanation. The basement is considered the most active area of the mansion. Visitors on ghost tours have reported extreme drops in temperature, unexplainable feelings of dread, and the sensation of being watched by something they cannot see. Several people have refused to go back down after their first visit. During one of Rockwood's annual Halloween ghost tours, a group of visitors were exploring the second floor when one woman suddenly burst into tears. She couldn't explain why. She said she was overcome with an intense feeling of sadness, grief, and longing that wasn't her own. As quickly as it came, it disappeared the moment she stepped into the hallway. A paranormal team that spent the night inside the mansion captured an EVP, an electronic voice phenomenon, essentially a voice on a recording that wasn't audible to anyone present, of a woman whispering what sounded like a name. They played it back for the museum staff. One of the longtime docents went pale. She said it sounded like the name of Joseph Shipley's wife. One of the most haunting recurring reports involved children. Multiple visitors on completely separate occasions, who had no knowledge of each other's stories, have reported seeing a small girl standing at the top of the staircase, staring down at them. When they blink or look away, she's gone. No one has been able to identify who she might be, but everyone who has seen her says the same thing. She looked lonely. Rockwood Mansion is open to the public, but once you walk through those doors, you may start to wonder, are you the one doing the visiting? Or are you the one being watched? The Woodburn House, Delaware's haunted governor's mansion. Most states have a governor's mansion. Delaware's just happens to be haunted. The Woodburn House in Dover was built around 1790 and has served as the official residence of Delaware's governor since 1966. It's a beautiful, stately colonial home, the kind of place that radiates history, dignity, and something else. Something that knocks on walls in the middle of the night. Something that reaches out from the past and refuses to let go. The house has a long and complicated history. Before the Civil War, it was part of the Underground Railroad, providing shelter to freedom-seeking enslaved people making their journey north. It was also the site of darker chapters, including the activities of slave catchers who prowled this very area looking for those escapees. That kind of history, the desperate hope, the fear, the brutality, as a way of leaving a mark. The Woodburn House has not one, not two, but 4 documented ghosts, a remarkable distinction for any building, let alone one still actively used as a government residence. The first and most famous is the ghost of a colonial-era slave catcher, a menacing, shadowy figure seen lurking near the old oak tree on the property. Witnesses describe him as tall, dark, and deeply threatening. He appears suddenly and vanishes just as fast, leaving behind a cold, oppressive presence that lingers in the air. The second ghost, is that of a small girl, seen skipping through the hallways and gardens. Unlike the sinister slave catcher, she seems playful and innocent. Guests have reported hearing the sound of light, rapid footsteps, like a child running, in rooms with no children present. The third apparition is an old Quaker man, reportedly seen sitting beneath the great oak tree in the yard, peacefully watching the grounds. He's said to be harmless, a quiet, contemplative presence who appears and disappears without warning. And then there is the fourth, and perhaps most unsettling, the ghost of a man believed to have been a heavy drinker in his lifetime. Governors and their staff have reportedly found wine disappearing from the wine cellar overnight, with no explanation. One former governor noted bottles move from their original positions with no memory of touching them. Governors themselves have spoken publicly about strange experiences in the house. One former governor of Delaware told reporters that he and his wife would occasionally hear knocking on the walls late at night, rhythmic, deliberate knocking, with no source they could identify. Maintenance crews found no plumbing issues, no animals, no structural explanation. A staff member who worked at the Woodburn house for several years reported seeing a translucent figure of a man crossing the hallway near the staircase. She assumed at first it was a colleague. When she went to speak to him, there was no one there. She checked every room. The house was empty. Perhaps the most striking account comes from a dinner party held by a former governor. A guest, a complete skeptic who had laughed at the ghost stories before entering the house, went rigid mid-conversation and stared at the doorway. When asked what was wrong, he said quietly, "There's a man standing in the door." He described the slave catcher, the tall, dark figure, in detail that matched accounts he had never read or heard. The figure was gone moments later. The guest left the dinner early and, by all accounts, never fully returned to his previous skepticism. In a house where the governor of Delaware sleeps, something else is also very much awake. 3 places, 3 stories, 3 reminders that history doesn't always stay in the past. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is certain: Fort Delaware, Rockwood Mansion, and the Woodburn House all carry something that visitors feel the moment they walk through the door. Something that stays with them long after they leave. If you're brave enough, some of these places offer public tours. But don't say I didn't warn you. If this video gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe. Which of these 3 places would you spend a night in?